Hey y'all, Casey and Brandon here, and we've been reading more comics. So we got some comics to talk about.
What do you want to talk about, Casey Jones?
Well, Logan's World seems to be on top of our stack here. Clover's very interested.
So we bought
Logan's World.
we bought a bag of 6 issues of Logan's Run and Logan's World.
But we thought they were all gonna be Logan's World, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's issue 1, 2, and 3 of Logan's World, and then issue 4, 5, and 6 were the pre Logan's Run story.
Yeah, we were tricked.
Yeah, and this one's the Logan's Run comic adaptations are fascinating, just in that they were. I think Marvel had the license initially. There was the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was originally a science fiction novel, and then there was the movie of it that was all set in a mall.
Yeah.
Future mall.
The arcade. Ooh.
Yeah.
Floating around.
There is no sanctuary. And then there was a Marvel comic adaptation, and then these ones, which are published by Adventure Comics, which sounds like a mob front.
Yeah, I've never heard of that one.
And then there's a newer Logan's Run that were after these that were maybe Dynamite or some kind of like... not possibly the best comic, because I remember reading those, and these are the ones I was most interested because they're weird.
Uh-huh.
I think we talked about it last time. We've been digging up a bunch of Barry Blair comics,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm kind of fascinated, like Ursel comics and the weirdness of everything about that and everything.
Aircel is such a weird story of like not comic company turns comic company and then makes interesting comics.
Yeah, it was like an air conditioning company in Canada that then had some kind of, they lost a license or something and decided to switch, because Barry Blair was working there, they decided to switch over into publishing comics. And I don't know, what do you think of did you just read the first 2 issues?
Yeah, I've just read the first 2 issues. I didn't get to the third one yet, but the first 2 were, I don't know, interesting. I like Barry Blair's art. I have an affinity, as he apparently does, for twinks. So like, that is a lot in there. Although there were like weird bits of the story that felt very out of character for the Logan's Run stuff. But also I haven't read I haven't read the original book or sequel or whatever. But there's like a weird like puppet character in here that just sort of appears as if we're supposed to, like this right there. Where'd it go? This one. It's like something from like Sesame Street or something. And it's just like appears in Logan's dream, and then I don't know. It was a bit weird.
And the villains are basically like Mad Max pirates.
Yes, yeah, they call them some fancy Italian Borgia bikers, because they're all like, they have like rapier swords and wear like 3 Musketeer outfits, and they ride jet bikes. Yeah, I don't know. I like Barry Blair's style. It's like cute, like feminine, mixed with masculine, and that's fun. What did you think?
It's funny. I grew up reading a lot of Aircel and Barry Blair comics, and they were always kind of like, just kind of part of the wash of 1980s, just like weird indie comics all the time. And the older I got, the weirder they seemed that they were sold to the mainstream.
Yeah, it seems strange that this stuff would be, because you said it was just like on stands alongside Spider-Man or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I would go to comic stores that were had a lot of indie comics and things, and in Seattle, and when I lived in Oregon, so they were just kind of among things. But like, I feel like Barry Blair is a person who's incapable of not like wearing his sexual interests on his sleeve, doing essentially all ages comics.
Yeah.
So like, here's an all age comics, and everybody's nipples are just poking through their shirts.
Yeah.
They're all like kind of lithe teens or something.
Fingers.
Figures. And he draws men and women kind of similar in a way.
Similar. Yeah, except for the chest. That's basically the main difference.
Yeah, and I think the main thing I got out of these when I was reading them is like, they're not good, but they're not they're fun to read.
Yeah, they are fun to read. Yeah, that's.
And so I was in the work of mine that I was doing. I started plotting a comic right after I read these Logan's World, and I remember thinking like what if I approached it kind of in the sense of like just making this weird issue and just kind of having fun in the way that Logan's World was.
Yeah.
And it kind of took some weight off of me trying to make like the best comic I could ever do, and just like almost put myself in this mind frame of doing just kind of like competent version of kind of, because a banged out 1980s comic, because these really, like, most Barry Blair comics I've read, if you told me that it took him a week to do them, like, a normal comic, like a month is fairly fast, but these ones, if you said this took a week, I'd be like, yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, it's I forgot that when I was reading it, I had remarked to you actually about like how minimal the backgrounds are, which is always a sign to me of that kind of thing where it's like, oh, okay, so you just spent almost no time at this, because it'll just be like half the book's just floating heads, and
and you can draw, but sometimes like not fairly often they'll just be very wonky faces or something that's kind of drawn like surprisingly badly for professional comics.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I like the Logan's Run movie, and these were just sort of like fun little extras.
Also, the cliffhanger on the issues that we got, it leaves it in a very grim place.
Oh, I haven't read the third issue, so I don't know.
I'll ruin it for you.
But yeah, that's Logan's Run. Or Logan's World.
Logan's World.
That we read. And then we read this issue of Hellblazer, John Constantine. It was, it seemed like an in-between issue or something between like larger plot arcs, but it was cool. It dealt with John Constantine having, they call it like demon blood AIDS or something, like literally. I'm not trying to make light of that. Like I think that's literally what they say. Like, I think it came out around like the AIDS crisis.
Yeah, he's literally, so it's set, you should mention it, it's Jamie Delano and John Ridgway. And and Alfredo Alcala, or probably assume he's the inker. And I should qualify, like, I've always been really frustrated by John Constantine comics. Because I think the character is really interesting, and that he's essentially like a spiritual detective. Is that a good way to describe him?
Yeah. Paranormal detective.
Yeah, and I really liked the Keanu Reeves movie.
Yeah,
it's excellent. It's like,
I don't know if it's excellent, but it's very fun.
It's weirdly like when I look back at my King City book, there are things that I got fairly directly influenced by the Constantine movie. And I always feel like it's a defeat when movies do a better job at a comic than the comics. And I always felt like I was like, there's probably good Constantine comics out there, but I have yet to really read them.
That's an interesting idea that I'm mulling over. It's like, yeah, because in comics, the possibilities are almost limitless. There's no budget restrictions like there is with a movie. So you should be able to do crazier and more exciting and more wonderful things with a comic. But so yeah, if a movie gets it right, it's like, oh, comics, what are you doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, that also brings up the idea that it might not, like, doing more with something might not necessarily even make it better.
Yeah, that's true.
I think there's it might almost be that the Hollywood polish of it took out some of the kind of grim alcoholic feeling that most of the comics have. Like, he's still, like, Constantine's thing is he knows he's going to go to hell because when he was younger he committed suicide. And also the comic, they're very, I remember reading a thing at one point that the creators based them off of Sting.
I could see that visually.
Yeah, which I guess, but I don't think Sting is cool, so then maybe that might be part of it.
He was seen as like a post-punk kind of guy in the 80s.
I always like to joke that David Lynch cast him in the first Dune adaptation because he wanted to kill him. It's like an excuse to murder Sting on camera.
No. That's silly. He acted it in a lot of movies in the 80s, I think. Sting, yeah. Because I remember, I've seen him in a bunch of stuff.
Zoolander and Zoolander 2.
Oh, that's right. He's. Wait, what's like the weird thing? Like
he's the father of Hansel.
But isn't it like not actually Sting? It's like the idea of Sting is Hansel's father or something?
No, Hansel's father is Hansel's father is actually Sting. But I think in the first movie they asked Hansel what he likes, and he's like, I'm a big fan of Sting. I don't really listen to his music at all, but just like I really like the idea of him.
Oh, okay, that's what I'm getting mixed up.
Yeah.
But anyways, we're getting very far afield. This is a fun little issue that they actually, speaking of the movie, you pointed out that they take like a thing from this issue for the movie, which is where he's got a cockroach, puts the cup over the cockroach, and then blows cigarette smoke into the cup, and then suffocates the cockroach with the cigarette smoke, which shows up in the movie.
Yeah, it's like a good way to show how he's feeling. He blows smoke in there, and it's just like, you suffer.
Yeah.
So in this one, it's set on his birthday, and he just keeps getting bothered by different spirits. Like a bunch of newspapers become the shape of a man and chase him down the street, and then the same thing happens with a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. And there's a recurring theme where they're just showing like buildings being destroyed by a wrecking ball. Like, there's a really, like, the beginning of it starts and he's just kind of hungover walking down the street, and he walks by a couple fighting with a knife, and then a building gets knocked down and there's a corpse on the street.
Looks very much like New York in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, and then he has a street level prostitute yell at him, mm-hmm. and he goes to a bar and then starts seeing ghosts and gets kicked out of the bar. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things I liked about it is it's really just him, like 3/4 of the comic is just him wandering around the city, mm-hmm. having a horrible day.
Mm-hmm. And like sinking into that depression. And it finally takes this one ghost to remind him of this woman that he cares for, to like get himself out of it and shave and get himself back together.
Mm-hmm. And they have sex in a tree.
They do.
And then the end of the issue, he goes out and he buys.
Oh, this is so cool.
Yeah, one of my favorite. Like I was like, this comic is really using, like the medium to show a mood. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of it, he buys a big box of cigarettes and is in his hotel room, and Swamp Thing grows out of the cigarettes. Mm-hmm. And the thing I really liked that made me think about him, the earlier scene with him putting the cockroach in the glass, is he pulls some of the stuff that Swamp Thing is made out of, the tobacco, and he rolls a cigarette while he's talking to him and lights it. Oh, this occurred to me that maybe Swamp Thing showed up to yell at him because he had sex in a tree right before that in the scene.
He is upset with Constantine because Constantine he's interfering. This was the one like difficulty with this. This is clearly like in between like these large story arcs. Sure. We're supposed to understand what's going on. So like Constantine is interfering with some sort of religious thing, and then so Swamp Thing is like shows up and is like, dude, what the heck? You just like ruined the second coming or something like that. And Constantine's like, yep, let me take a little bit of your plant matter, roll it up and smoke it.
And then it ends with Constantine saying to Swamp Thing, like, don't worry, all of your reasons you're annoyed at me, I've got a great plan.
So yeah, that was Hellblazer.
September 88, issue number 9. Mm-hmm. And next we have
Hot Damn.
Welcome to the Fabulous Hot Damn.
Yeah, I think the book's actually just called Hot Damn, but it's supposed to be like Vegas looking on the cover, so it's like a sort of demonic slot machine. And this is unfortunately issue 2. So there's, we're missing a little bit of stuff, but basically the premise is that person is in hell for his sins, and hell's bad, as hell is supposed to be, but it's also like not all bad. So he's like his punishments are scheduled, and then after his punishments he like goes out drinking with his demon buddy, and they go to like therapy group and stuff. And then there's something about like heaven isn't what it's cracked up to be, and God is like this actual person there kind of, who just like wants everything to be about him, and
It's a little self-centered.
yeah, I don't know. It is interesting.
It's
But
an interesting
I don't
theme, because I think last week we both read a Cry for Dawn issue.
Yeah.
And that one
Oh,
had both heaven and hell in it as well.
that's interesting. Yeah.
And both of them, hell or the devil are shown as like sucking, but heaven and God are portrayed as worse, which is a theme I saw in both of them.
Yeah.
Because in this one, like,
Interesting.
the devil's name is Bob.
Is it?
Yeah, he introduced himself as Joe. Sorry. He's going through all of his names, and he's like, but call me Joe. My friends call me Joe.
That's right.
And the scheduled tortures that they have to go through are really funny. There's a page where they just have to walk across a bunch of Legos.
Yeah.
And then they have no more tears, but it's called
Full tears.
full tears shampoo put in their eyes. So it's just shampoo and Legos. And then in heaven, they're just hanging out with this kind of like balding Santa Claus looking God who just wants to talk about himself all the time. And something about the art style is really like everything is depicted as kind of gross and crude, even heaven. Like the angels have these wings, and the places where their wings go to their backs is always a little bloody. It feels kind of British in that way.
Yeah. Almost the notes of what was the Neil Gaiman show we watched? Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett.
Oh yeah, the
Good Omens.
Good Omens. Yeah, almost like a preacher. Feel to some of it.
Okay.
It's written by Ryan Ferrier and illustrated by Valentin Ramon.
I always forget that Garth Ennis is not American, because Preacher feels so. I mean, it's set in America.
I think that was a big thing with a lot of the early Vertigo stuff, is they would get United Kingdom writers and artists and then bring them over to do stories about America. So I remember Shade the Changing Man being like, let's go on a tour of America.
Oh yeah.
Which I think would be kind of a fun idea. Like, you're hired outside of your country, and you're. It reminds me, one of the books that I didn't have here because I haven't read it yet is I got a Urasawa book on the Louvre.
The Louvre, yeah, that's right.
I think we've talked about before, there's a whole series of comics which are being commissioned by the Louvre, which are all really interesting. The JoJo's guy did one, and the Walking Man guy did one. And I love the idea of being asked to do a story about a specific place that isn't like your hometown, and having to be like, go to France and think of what kind of story you want to tell about a place.
Yeah.
But I thought this was entertaining.
Yeah, it was okay. We got it from like a 50-cent bin or something like that. So
there's something kind of funny about we live in Las Vegas. One of the things we always look for is stories set in Las Vegas because it's such a fictional place. And I remember this thing you said, I think it's in Vegas, and it being set in hell, I thought was a funny contrast to that.
Sin City. And then you were very excited about your favorite cross-gen property.
Yeah, I don't know it's because CrossGen's a really weird publisher. Yeah. They had a bunch of money behind them and did a bunch of books all out of Florida. I remember one of the big things when they started is they want everyone that worked for them to move down to Florida and work out of one office, which I totally understand the reason for wanting to do that, but it's funny in the era of the internet when you can work from anywhere to be like, let's limit that. But yeah, I never read the first issue. This is Ruse by Mark Waid and Mirko
Andolfo?
No, Para Federci. I was just complaining. I'm horrible at pronouncing people's names when we out them here, but yeah, so I'd only read later issues of Ruse. And my impression was always that it's basically like a Sherlock Holmes story, but the Watson character is a pretty blonde lady that's as smart as Sherlock Holmes. So kind of like there's an American TV version called Elementary I was a big fan of, where Lucy Liu played Joan Watson. So it's a little like that. I almost feel like it lost a little something to read the first issue, because I'd always just pick up these quarter bin Ruse issues and just be like, this is a bathtub comic to read where it's in the middle of a mystery and I don't really know what's going on. But yeah, it was okay. I think Mark Waid's a solid writer. He's like, a good guy to show up and get the job done, but didn't Didn't blow me away.
Okay. I didn't read it, so I'm not big into detective stuff. So that's just like one of the areas where I give all credence to you. You know about the detectives and crime things.
I do like detective stories. I mean, one of the things I like so much about a detective story is how much it's, from a storytelling point of view, it's just really like a clear puzzle to solve, and then it's like it gives you this like clear plot that everyone kind of knows the rules of what happens in a detective story, and then you can play around that and do other things that are like the other things become more interesting than it's like the skeleton is necessary, but it's not necessarily the most fun part of the story of the detective through. Like on my birthday recently, we just watched The Long Goodbye.
Yeah, that was good.
And I feel like the main plot of that isn't at all what makes it a good movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Huh. That's interesting. Yeah.
Because there's parts that like his cat is really picky and he has to get a certain kind of cat food for it, and he goes to like a 24-hour mini mart and meets this weird cool teen that works there, who like when he asks like, do you have curry brown cat food, the guy's like, what do I need a cat for, I got a girl. Then later on they're both arrested and he passes him in jail, and they just pass each other and goes, how's your girl, how's your cat? And it's like little things like that are really fun, but
yeah, very quippy dialogue.
Yeah, it's not really about the crime that was committed.
Next up is another Barry Blair comic, Leather and Lace.
Leather and Lace. This is a really weird one. I was talking about this on my Instagram about how this comic came out with an adult version and a general audiences version. So it's basically like a woman goes looking for her like sex trafficked sister who's gone missing.
Oh wow, I did not know it was like that.
A dark story, all ages thing.
Wow.
And she hooks up with like kind of this underworld, like this cool leather jacket wearing underworld lady, and it's really similar character archetypes to the Bondage Fairies comic, the like manga porn by the guy Condom, where you have like this innocent blonde girl and then this kind of more worldly brunette girl with short hair, and it's similar to that. And there's these like kind of like a dominatrix woman that has these lizards she's trained as her assistants, and they're just like basically teenage boys in lizard costumes, and I think it's a better Barry Blair than the Logan's World comics that we were talking about earlier. Like this one's ink washed. It's very like it doesn't quite look like it was done in a week, but it has some cruder art in it, and not much really happens in it, but it was just mostly. It's really nicely printed too. It's like cardstock cover.
Oh, nice.
And the letters column was called Letters and Lace, and this is the first letter column that they'd run in it in issue 5. Was the first time they started doing a letters column, and the majority of the letters are really honest, like, hey, the art's kind of crude, but hopefully like you'll figure it out as you keep going. And my main point of this is it's weird to have a general audiences version that I was buying at like age 15 or something of essentially something that's set up to be a porn comic.
That is very weird. Huh.
But there is something about like kids almost want to have things that are a little bit not for them, a little edgy. Like I always think about how 17 magazine it's made for like 15-year-olds who like, it's like it's not, no 17-year-olds aren't actually reading it. Or at least that was the idea that I had. So maybe the general audience version of this is like you're getting this a peek into a dark world. There's nothing that's actually too much for you. Although the themes are pretty.
That's pretty heavy stuff, yeah.
Although in the 80s, Marvel Comics had a lot of similar themes.
Yeah.
I remember the first issue of Cloak and Dagger. Have you read that one?
Oh yeah, that is like that's exactly what they were trying to do with that.
Yeah.
That was actually a bigger move in the 70s is when that started.
Okay.
Because you had it was a big shift that was like I might be wrong that this is the first one, but like the sort of flagpole shift was Kevin O'Neill and Neil Adams, thank you. I always forget his name. The Green Arrow and Green Lantern stuff where Green Arrow's like, you're protecting all the little green men, but what about the black man and stuff like this, and like trying to like make it more like gritty, real, and like then Green Arrow's sidekick has like a heroin addiction. And
what's his name? Do you remember?
Speedy. Yes.
What kind of drugs does he use?
Heroin, which is not that's upper drug.
Oh, should have gone with speed.
Yeah. But that kind of kicked off, like, as far as I'm aware, this like sort of shift towards the darker stuff, and then you obviously have like Dark Knight Returns, and then the rest, you know, into the 80s got much darker.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, yeah, Leather and Lace. So I guess things were darker then. Ta-da! So then this next one is the darkest horror of Morella.
Did you lead that in so you could go into the darkest horror?
I didn't, but sometimes we just the transitions are flawless. That was not a flawless transition. Oh well. So this one, I don't know. I never heard of it before. Again, we picked it up in like a quarter bin.
And it's Glenn Danzig and Junko Mizuno, which is an interesting combination.
Well, there's two stories, and so the first one is Junko Mizuno, and then the second one on art. She does the art, and then ESV does the art on the second story.
Okay. Is Danzig write anything, or is he just the publisher?
No, Danzig does write. Sorry, I meant to say yes. Danzig does write both of the stories.
Okay. Junko Mizuno's a Japanese artist who draws very like Sanrio style art.
Yes, I think I would have liked her stuff at one point, but I really don't like it now. And
what about it is not your jam?
I just don't like the like super done up. Oh wait, I can't show that stuff actually. I'm just realizing, wow, there's none of this I can show, even the cover.
Is that a specific like YouTube thing?
Yeah.
Okay, because I think I was watching the Kayfabe guys video, and I feel like they were flipping through things that had nipples at some point.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I guess it's just like a risk, and so nobody report us. Yes, please. Free the nipple. But
it's a bold cover. I wonder if that came wrapped.
Right? It does say mature audience, just like blood and like stuff. Wow, slit wrist too. I just noticed that. Oh my gosh.
Slit wrist, bleeding all over a woman's naked chest.
Yes.
With upside down crucifixes kind of drawn on her cheeks.
Wow. Danzig, don't cut yourself on your own edge.
Hey Kids Comics.
Yeah, Hey Kids Comics.
So, to Junko Mizuno stuff?
Oh yeah, I don't like that. It's this like super done, like makeup up, like prissy look to me. That makes the characters look like they are children.
It kind of has like a are you thinking almost like the kids when they dress them up in pageants?
Yeah, it feels
because it's really cartoony stuff, but they're wearing like they have lipstick, lips, and heavy eyeshadow, but then they all look like Sanrio.
Yeah, and
like Bratz dolls.
I just like anytime when like there's like a character is supposed to be like you know, really tough and like stuff, and if they look like super done up, I'm like, when did you fit that into your like world domination scheme? When did you were able to just like
Dark magic? Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe that's really silly, but to me, I just don't like it. It's like I'm not afraid of Miss Perfect eyeshadow here. So, but the second story does a much better job. It's like way like darker, creepier, and it's the same character. It's just drawn by different people, and the character's name is Morella.
I didn't even know Erotic was going on in 2006. If I remember right, there's a really good Japanese pinup artist named Rock and Jelly Bean, and the first time I saw his work was in a Erotic pinup book.
Oh, that's the publisher?
Yeah, it's Danzig's company.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I don't know. I would say that this is probably for somebody. It's not so much for me, but it was an interesting thing to read. Like, I hadn't seen something like this before.
It's fascinating it's printed in Canada because I think a lot of things are printed in Canada, but one
can't be sold there.
Yeah, one of the things I learned in Canada was just how much like they will just restrict books if someone at the border decides that they were.
Yeah, thank goodness for our freedom of our First Amendment rights in the United States, because it's real weird in Canada.
Yeah, but God bless them for publishing Verotic.
They didn't publish it; they printed it.
Or printing, sorry. And then you read issue 9 of Pineapple Army.
I did, and it was really fun.
Also by Urasawa,
liked
I mentioned earlier, 20th Century Boys and Pluto fame.
That's right. Yeah, it's really good. In this one, he has to help this girl in, I want to say Honduras, and it has to do with like American fruit companies, which was like very topical back in the 80s. But even reading it now, it was really good.
I know about Dole in Hawaii, but is it similar to that?
Basically, in any of the countries that were like nationalizing industries, it was American investments were under threat.
Okay.
So the headquarters for this American fruit company is like they have like a private army almost, and like they're it's like the girl's dad gets captured by a person who's trying to extort money for his return or something. Anyways, it's good. I liked it.
Yeah,
Pineapple Army's great. Highly recommend.
They're always a good quarterman fan.
Mm-hmm.
They're publishing it bi-weekly back in the 80s too.
Wow, that's cool.
1989.
Then the next one that we read was called I guess I could probably show that. I don't know. Whatever. Sybil War.
I respect the title. I assume her name is Sybil.
Yes, her name is Sybil, and it's very ridiculous. Let's see, it's written by Don Adams and Dave Lang on art, and it's ridiculous, aggressively 90s, I would say, aggressively early 90s.
I've seen a lot of nudity and guns.
A lot of nudity, a lot of guns. Coffin nails. She smokes her coffin nails, which are cigarettes in a package that looks like a coffin. It's pretty great. It's this ridiculous pin up in the middle.
What's the publisher of this?
The publisher is Dark Matter Studios.
Of course it is.
I think it's like a independent or something. Yeah, I know we're all shocked.
A lot of John Lennon glasses.
A lot of John Lennon glasses, which again it feels like aggressively early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Very like Train Spotting. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This isn't even early 90s. This is later 90s because I forgot the major conceit of this book is that it's a Y2K panic book.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I forgot that. That's so amazing. Yes. So in this world, it's set, post 2000, because in this world, the Y2K bug was a real thing and the whole world came crashing down because of a couple of zeros. And so technology is really limited.
And clothes are outlawed, clearly.
Clothes are apparently outlawed. You have weird mutants that come out, which I can't remember what their explanation is, but yeah, it is ridiculous.
There's even an ad in the back of it that says 6 reasons to buy a DVD player after Y2K hits.
That's right.
And it's just horror movies. Ozone, Bloodletting, Dead Next Door, Polymorph.
So if you found this in a quarter bin, I would say pick it up for the sheer weirdness of it. But aside from that,
Ad on the back.
It's designed. There was even a credited person who designed the back cover matter.
Of course. It says Loco Colo, and it says it's the shit.
Which so very much of its time, and that's a drink that they drink in the story.
Loco.
It's Logan, yeah. There's so much dated slang in here. Oh, and I don't know. I don't think I have to explain this, but maybe if people are watching who were born after the year 2000 or something, the Y2K bug was this big scare where, computers in the 90s were still relatively new, and the memory space on computers was very limited, especially when their operating systems were being designed, which they were designed even earlier, especially bank operating systems. That was the real issue. But just technology in general was the issue. Was they didn't, like, all the dates, all the years, they all ended at 1999, and so they just had like 99, right, to save space. That's how limited the memory was on the early computers, and so they didn't have, like, in order to differentiate between the 1900s and then the 2000s, they had to, like, rewrite the operating systems to make room for the the zeros, and the people thought they're like, oh, they're not gonna fix this in time, and all the technology is gonna come crashing down as soon as the ball hits, and the computers realize that they can't like document.
Well,
the
I'm
right
a fair amount
year,
older than
basically.
you. I'm like 10 years older than you. 13, I think. And I remember, like, I was in Times Square in 2000.
Oh,
and I remember, like, being not entirely certain that things were going to work out, but not convinced it wasn't, because there wasn't a ton of clear information on it.
Yeah, that's because also there wasn't really the internet like it is now. So, like, yeah, access to info was either, like, hearsay from people that you just knew or the news.
Trying to remember if there's a New Year's 2000 science fiction movie. I'm trying to remember the name of it, the one with Ray Fiennes where they sell memories.
Oh yeah, that is super good. It's a really good cyberpunk movie. Darn it, I wish I could remember the title. If I can remember the title, I will try to put it in the
Just giving you
frame
homework
right
but
now.
It's a good movie.
One, yeah.
So Sybil War, issue 00, Dark Matter.
Yeah. Moving on.
Let's see. We've got a Patrick Kindlon and Maria Lovett, There's Nothing There book.
Oh yeah, that's the title. I was like, what is it? Yeah, title.
I haven't read these yet.
I get pretty much every Maria Lovett book that I see because I really like her. I really like her. I really like her writing, her art, and everything. And it was cool that Brandon knows Patrick, so cool to get to see some of his work too. Yeah, so that was neat.
So we haven't actually looked in it. We were talking about publishers a lot recently.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't looked in if we... I'll leave it there.
Yeah. So the next one...
Oh, I haven't read Kamui yet. Did you read this yet?
Oh, I did. Yeah, yes.
One of the early manga, like samurai manga translated?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just Izzy Ninja?
Oh, actually it is Ninja. That's a good point. Although I did this, like, deep dive on ninja stuff recently. It almost certainly was never like we have popularized it to be. Like, ninjas weren't...
It's because they're secret.
Yeah,
They're ninjas.
I would say if you like Wolf and Cub,
Lone Wolf and Cub.
Lone Wolf and Cub, and Naruto, this is for you.
Is that a crossover of... Because I feel like that's very different audiences.
They are, which is kind of what I'm like. I don't think this is for anybody.
Oh, you didn't like it?
No.
Okay. I haven't read it yet, but I mean, it might be very specific to me, but I was just looking through it and I'm really enjoying the hand-done translated sound effects. They look like they're done with a brush.
Yeah, I could see it being like more for like an artist or something who's like, ooh, appreciate that. It feels to me like a less fun version of Shaolin Cowboy by what's the cool guy? Jeff Darrow.
Okay, so just like lots of going around crazy fights.
Yes.
It's also difficult when you have, also Letter's column is called Death Threats, which I think was the Poison Elves letter column, if I'm remembering right.
That's
or
cool.
his introduction he would write. I mean, these early manga are weird because sometimes you get things like a Pineapple Army where it's like self-contained 20-page chapters.
Love that.
And sometimes you get something where like this is meant to be read in a Takoban book.
Yeah.
At like 200 pages and not...
That makes sense.
Not necessarily in a monthly 20-page thing.
Totally.
Let's see. Cave Bang.
Oh, that was ridiculous. I don't think we can show any of that. It's an Eros comic, right? Or NBM?
It's Eros.
Eros comics, yeah. It's it's just, I mean, it's just it's very weird and weirdly dark. They basically show like a caveman, cavewoman, and they're doing stuff, and then the last panel in each little short story is like a modern day panel, and so the idea is like, it's like we are like cavemen and cavewomen, still in certain ways, but it's kind of weirdly dark.
It's very dark.
Yeah.
Like, it has lots of things where it shows like a caveman and a cavewoman like having sex, and then looking over at this beautiful kind of clouds and mountains on the horizon, and then the last panel is showing just a couple sitting and looking at a similar thing on their television screen.
I mean, that's actually one of the sweeter ones. It's one of the better ones. There's
Yeah.
other ones that it's like, then the guy like shoots like the person that somebody was cheating on. Or,
Yeah, no, there's a lot of like this is jealousy in Caveman, and it's a guy, going to attack them with a spear, and then the modern day version is it's a guy who shot his cheating partner.
Lava.
So and these ran in heavy metal originally, if I remember right.
Oh,
At least
that
the
makes
version I
sense.
saw.
I could see that.
By Tayar Ozken, who I also read that the Hotel Murder Mystery comic by him recently.
Oh, okay. That's cool. This one is like is unique. I would say like pick it up if you can find it for cheap, because it's not like big narratives. So
They're kind of like 2 or 3 page stories that are just really simple. It's more like if you like the guy's kind of Manara style art, then they're cool.
yeah.
Let's see. And I read John Byrne's Babe.
I have not read that, but I like John Byrne. So.
It's fun. It's kind of dumb.
Okay.
I like John Byrne a lot, and he's done a lot of cool stuff. This one, it's this giant redheaded model looking woman who they find by the side of the road. I kept getting caught up in story. I'd be interested in your reading it, because I kept getting caught up in story things where they take a naked woman with amnesia to the police station, and the police are like, they're like, we don't know what to do with her. Like, she's your problem. So I wonder, like, from a legal point of view, how you'll read some of this stuff. And then another guy just goes and picks her up, and he's like a Hollywood agent. And then they're immediately on television, like, I found this star I'm gonna have. It's gonna be my next big thing. And so the main character goes to rescue her, and they immediately put her on like Letterman. And she's like She-Hulk strong. So I don't know, it's a lot
John Byrne's got a thing for strong ladies.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the John Byrne stuff is like kind of where he did really good superhero.
So John Byrne did a lot of like superhero comics.
Yeah, I was saying kind of his strength or at least what interests me most about John Byrne, like he did a lot of really good kind of post Jack Kirby Marvel comics.
Totally.
Like his run on Fantastic Four is really fun. He did a really fun run of She-Hulk.
Yes, really good.
And then the stuff of his that I think is most interesting is when he did things like Next Men, where he would go and do kind of his own version of X-Men over at Dark Horse. And so this feels a little like he's kind of almost returning to a She-Hulk type character.
Yeah,
but it's not as jokey as his run on She-Hulk.
And it's Dark Horse Legends, right? So it's like creator-owned. Is that what that was? Or
Yeah, Legend is almost like there's an ad in the back of it that's interesting, because it was like Madman, Sin City, Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot, Concrete, Hellboy, and Arthur Adams, Monkey Man O'Brien. So it was almost like when Image, I mean this is a little later, but my impression is essentially it's like when Image was doing their big creator-owned push, that really inspired a lot of other people. That you had Bravera was a publisher that did that. They had like Howard Chaykin and Walter Simonson, a bunch of those guys.
Oh,
did
and
books
there
over
was
there.
like Epic at Marvel.
I mean that was before. Epic was like pre-Image.
Oh, okay.
So this is like kind of
led the charge.
Yeah. So but Legend was really like was really some of the most exciting guys, because you have Frank Miller and Mike Mignola and Arthur Adams that are kind of, and Dave Gibbons was over there. So I remember Alred was really the young guy they brought in. So
cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to read that one. And then you read this it's a sampling of the AWA books.
Yeah, I really like this format of things. I remember Image Comics do these where they would be we have a bunch of new books coming out. Here's the a bunch of them bundled together in a sampler.
Yeah.
And I'm about halfway through this, and I don't like any of them, so it's hard to talk about. And
yeah,
it's normally when we go out and we buy comics, Quarterman comics and things, it's always we don't buy things to complain about them.
Right. Yeah, that's not our goal.
So we're always I found a thing and it's cool in what it is. It's weird. I can say Leather and Lace was interesting to me in their format, that they had an adult comic, that they tried to make a general audience version for it. I guess AWA is interesting to me in that it is, it's essentially a company put together by Axel Alonso, who was a big 100 Bullets Vertigo era editor.
Oh, interesting. I think of him as the Brian Michael Bendis Marvel stuff.
Yeah, he was very much it felt like he was doing kind of the edgy mainstream comics in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And this the first story in this is about a bunch of mob guys that are being haunted by ghosts. And then the second one is a zombie thing, and I don't know, both of them just felt very paint by the numbers, competent but not personal in any way that interested me. So I will probably finish the rest of these, and maybe there's some other stuff in it. I think that there's some J. Michael Straczynski stuff in here, and he's kind of hit and miss for me. I liked his run on Spider-Man a lot, and not so much when he did some other stuff. So I don't know. We'll see. It's interesting sometimes to see what some people want out of comics, even if it's so far removed from what I want from comics.
Yeah. Just checking in with other opinions.
Yeah, because a lot of it for me is I think one of the strengths of the comic book medium is oftentimes you can do something that you can't be done in any other place, and if you have just a guy with a pen, you can make a weird, cool, unique comic. And the idea of a mafia story and a zombie story, it's so there are so many mafia stories and so many zombie stories that there's not a gap you're filling if you do kind of straightforward, if you don't do something unique on those.
Yeah.
And kind of my main focus for reading this week is I got all the Cliff Chiang Catwoman Lonely City books.
Yeah, because you heard the pitch you gave me about them sounded really cool.
Yeah, so our friend Julie was talking them up a lot.
Yeah.
She's a big Catwoman fan.
Uh-huh.
And Catwoman's not really a character that's ever really clicked with me.
Same, yeah.
Because she seems there's no necessity in it. A lot of it is like she's a rich lady who wants to steal jewels because she's bored. Is a lot of my impression of her as a character. Maybe that's unfair.
I thought she was she had a hardscrabble life, and this was her making the best of it, kind of way. Didn't she grow up in an orphanage and stuff?
I don't know.
Oh, I don't think she was born rich or anything, because she always lives in the bad part of Gotham and stuff. But
I guess in year one, she's almost comes off as an escort character. I don't know if that's accurate.
Yeah, and she definitely hangs out with escorts. I always read her as it's the prototypical thief character, which is not a character type that resonates with me, which I run into a lot in D&D stuff. But regardless, this take seems really interesting because it's sort of her in her own world, because Batman is dead, right?
Yeah, so the basic premise for it is that it's Catwoman gets out of prison after 10 years, kind of outside of polite society, and there's a big night where Batman and the Joker were killed, and Commissioner Gordon died that same night, and then you kind of and she gets out, and Two-Face now is the mayor of Gotham, and Barbara Gordon is running for mayor. And so you kind of see what happened to all these characters, Killer Croc shows up, and then you get to see where the Riddler is the Riddler and his daughter are in it as characters.
Cliff Chang's on art and writing as well, right?
Yeah, no, and it's really fantastic.
So good.
Because most of the Cliff Chang stuff I'd seen, I wasn't really a fan of the writing. So to realize that he's a really exceptional writer was really cool. And he's coloring it as well, I believe.
Yeah, the color. I was going to say the coloring looks really. Almost the first page actually looked like the Batman animated series. No, this first page.
It is. It's very stark.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was cool to just kind of see Catwoman really fleshed out as like this like older woman who's like training again to figure things out.
And I think that's really cool that there is a story that focuses on an older woman. Like that's so rare. It's usually like 18-year-olds, you know. So to actually see like a more mature woman like doing her own thing seems really cool, and just being sort of free of that like Batman baggage of like she's just her own character now, I think is such a cool idea. And that really is one of the things that I used to like about like Elseworld stuff is like you could remove characters from some of their archetypal trappings to be able to tell a different kind of story about the same character.
Have you read The Nail?
Mm-mm.
If I remember right, it's a Alan Davis story. It's basically like the Justice League in a world where Superman didn't exist.
Oh. Huh.
I haven't read it. I just heard good things about it. So something I really like that Cliff Chang does in this, and you can see on the cover, he has all these different versions of Catwoman in the shadow, and he has these flashbacks where it'll show different eras of her, and it was almost like different parts of her life. So if you see like the kind of live action Adam West Batman, like that's the very beginning of her career when she's first meeting Batman, and then like they'll show like her when she's in her like 90s Jim Ballant purple suit. And one of the things which is funny, I was kind of wary of it at first because there's a thing where in DC Comics a lot of times like there'll be merchandise of the characters. So one of the things that keeps happening is she runs into these younger characters and they keep being like, I had a poster of you on my wall, like it's Farrah Fawcett or something. And she'll be like, which one? And like she meets a teenage boy and he's like, the one in the purple suit. And they show like a panel of this Jim Ballant, like kind of very like skin tight, sexy bad girl version of her. And she's like, oh, that one. And I think I get into my head about it because I'm like, if she's a vigilante that went to prison, it seems weird that there'd be just like merchandise of her.
I don't think that is weird though. I think there are people that like are. In fact, I've met people who are like way into El Chapo. They have like El Chapo T-shirts.
Okay.
Which isn't what I would choose.
Is there a poster line where El Chapo would be like, which poster line did you have?
Yeah. No, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean the merch stuff is really. I mean this less so. I remember there's a DC comic that I was complaining about at one point where it showed a kid's room and he had Batman. He had like a Batman action figure, and it was very much just like a thing that exists in this world. And I'm like, I don't think mass vigilante action figures are ever going to be sold to children. Like it's like a weird gray, because it's not even like you have a serial killer action figure, which would be weird enough in itself. It's like this is somebody who's like loose in the public currently and is a vigilante.
I guess. I don't know. It feels more reasonable to me because we do have like, you can get like a Freddy Krueger thing, and I know that that's because he's not real, but I feel like there are probably some people that have like, I wouldn't have this, but like a Ted Bundy little action figure.
Right, but I feel like them being serial killers puts them in a different category because you're almost like, this is the worst of the worst I'm going to have. Whereas if it's just like just a vigilante, which are things that have existed in history.
People have like Guy Fawkes. He's a vigilante.
But he's like a fictional character at this point.
He's real.
I know,
a real holiday for him.
But most people regard him as like, V for Vendetta, Guy Fawkes.
Not in England.
Okay.
But, I mean, we just don't live in a world where we have the Justice League, so we'll never know, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is just something that does not really quite exist in our world. So it is weird to have, I mean, like there's not a lot of, like, modern day criminals that you could sell toys of. I feel like people would not like that.
They're not fun. They don't have
You're saying the
snatchy
criminals need to like step up.
types.
The problem is not that you couldn't sell vigilante toys to children. The problem is that vigilantes need to step up their game.
Totally, yeah.
Well, there was
Have some
like
flair.
Do you remember maybe like a decade ago there was guys dressing up as superheroes going out and trying to fight crime?
In Seattle.
Yeah.
That was actually all over, but Seattle was a hub where they actually they sustained themselves for longer, which is interesting. Their costumes were okay. They were very functional, but that's the other thing. Like comic book superheroes, when it's like interesting enough of a look to like, want merchandise of, then it's probably not going to be a person that's going to exist in our world. There's not going to have, even when were vigilantes, there may probably still is, I don't know. It's not like they're wearing capes.
I was thinking the closest version I can think of it is if you had people that were good at something and also were convicted of crimes. Like you have a rapper that also like Tupac goes to prison.
Oh yeah, that's a good
or Mike
point.
Tyson or something.
Yeah, totally.
But they're not known for being that thing.
I mean, they kind of are. Like Lil Weezy is
I don't know who that is.
What's his actual name?
Lil Wayne?
Yes.
Is he gone to jail?
Oh yes.
Oh, that's right. Trump pardoned him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he had to be a rapper first.
No, I think he went to jail first.
But I mean, we wouldn't care about him if he wasn't a rapper. I mean, we clearly don't care about him because I don't even know.
Yeah.
Although, his line, real G's move in silence, like lasagna, is smarter than I thought it was when I initially heard it. Because you can't hear the G's in lasagna.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
So they move in silence.
So,
like ninjas.
Catwoman, really good. Highly recommend. Kilgore. You wanted to talk? You got.
Oh, no, I was using it as a bookmark. I haven't actually finished Kilgore.
Okay.
It is Renegade Press, which I like the name of. They have a good little R logo.
That is a good logo.
At some point, we should do a video which is just like talking about publishers and logos and things like that, because that could be fun.
Totally. I think that would be interesting, especially since we perseverate on it so frequently. But so in addition to the American comics and American size comics, we've been reading some other stuff as well. One of which is, this is volume 2, but we've got volumes 1, 2, and 3 somewhere of this book called Welcome Back, Alice by Shuzo Oshimi. So it's Manga, which we got at this awesome store in Las Vegas. Oh my gosh, they're so cool. It's called the Manga Hole. I swear one day we'll talk about all the comic book stores that are here. But Manga Hole, we just talk about them for really quick. They opened up like I think a year ago-ish, and they are a store that specializes in manga, and they have a great selection. And the people that work there are awesome and super friendly, and they just have like an awesome environment. And I don't know, I can't speak highly enough about Manga Hole. It's also it's in this cool little shopping area called Shanghai Plaza. It has a bunch of other like food places that are really good, and like little shopping stores. Anyways, Manga Hole, love it.
I've never had a manga store that felt like a comic shop in the same way.
That's a great description.
So usually you go into like a Barnes and Noble or something, and it'll just be like a wall of manga there and everything, and it feels a little impenetrable in some ways. Or you go into like a Japanese bookstore and it's a little impenetrable, and they have like English section or something. But this one's just like because it's a little like mom and pop manga store. And the people there are very approachable and cool, and they can talk to you about different comics. Like I started just loaning them a bunch of manga that I had just because I was like, oh, you should read this Gray book. That's really cool. And yeah, it's cool. So Welcome Back, Alice. I think we might have talked about this previously at some point.
Oh, okay.
But I finally finished book 3. Are you caught up?
I don't think I've finished book 3 yet, but I've read books 1 and 2. And the basic premise is just that, in case we haven't talked about it before, is there are these 3 high school friends, 2 boys, 1 girl, and then one of the boys like transfers to another school, like his family moves, and then it cuts to them being they're all high school age, I think, and the one that transferred comes back and is a girl, and so it's the person transitioned, and it's that character is supposed to be like the Alice in the Welcome Back Alex, but it's actually not named Alice, which is very strange.
Yeah, I don't know what the title is in reference to.
Yeah.
But it's weird too, because one of the things we were talking about is it's, a lot of how kind of trans people are talked about is very Western, and this is like basically the Alice character talks about how they reject being male, but they don't really seem to identify as being female either.
Yeah, they're trying to figure it out. It's really interesting. There's this, very complicated character. It's not at all straightforward, and I'm sure some Westerners would take issue with it, but
yeah, but I think it's honest in that it feels like the author is really, and there's afterward comics in each one where the author's kind of exploring how he feels about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like he even like talks about his like introduction to masturbating.
Yeah.
Where he's kind of helicoptering his penis, which is ridiculous. And he draws himself in this like ridiculous like little tofu man drawing. But it's cool. The Alice character is like complicated. Like sometimes seems a little manipulative and weird, but is sometimes like seeming to like look out for her friends in really selfless ways.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kids, so they kind of all there's three main characters all act kind of selfish at certain points and do the wrong thing, and it's really really smart.
Yes, agree.
Yeah, and this author's been doing a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he's somebody who's just kind of just like very new to a bunch of manga readers, and is really exciting and doing a bunch of cool books still.
Blood on the Tracks is another one of the
like a vampire book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is that the vampire book?
I don't know.
Because there's a vampire book, and then there's like a serial killer mom book, I think, if I remember right.
Oh yeah.
And this one's the least dark seeming one of the books.
Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't go darker, but it's really addictive. We had a friend over, and she just like was casually in our kitchen, read volume 3 and was like, "Where is volume 4? I need volume 4." And that's why I went to Manga Hole the other day.
That's right.
Because she was so adamant about it.
Unfortunately, volume 4 is not yet translated, but it's really fun. It's a rare look at like just trans people like having a life, and then also their friends and figuring all that stuff out. And it was very refreshing, good find. I was very happy with that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one that we picked up at Manga Hole, which is full credit to you. You picked up this. I like robots a lot, and this one is about robots. It's called Robosapiens, Tales of Tomorrow, and it's by Toranosuke Shimada, and it is what initially feels like you thought at first it was maybe going to be a series of short stories, but it's actually just chapters, and these characters that show up in the short stories, they get woven back into the story as it moves along, and it tells this super. I mean, the physical length of the story is no longer than almost any other tankobon, one of these books.
I think 300 pages.
Mm-hmm. But which is, I mean, that's a little bit bigger than most tankobons, but like not crazy. But the temporal length of the story is very, very long. It lasts like over 250,000 years or something like this.
Well, what I really liked about it is when I first started reading it, I read like 3 chapters, and I was like, oh, I thought it was one book, but it's just I thought it was one story, but it's a bunch of short stories. Because they work so well.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a detective story as the first story, and there is like the case is solved.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the case is solved, the character is like, but that's 30 years ago, and it shows them older.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like, the second story is just 2 robots visiting like a giant robot that was built out of a bunch of robots that died because of like a radiation problem or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just two robots connecting, and then they're saying like, maybe we'll meet each other sometime in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And they move on. And then, so you think like there's no reason to come back to these characters, but then you see them like 50 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're robots, they're kind of immortal. And there's things like, there's one of the characters is a robot woman who's tasked to live in a radiation bunker, basically,
Mm-hmm.
for thousands of years until the radiation decays.
Yeah.
And then there's two other robots that are sent into outer space to like return to Earth thousands of years later once they've done all this exploration.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really cool, and the art style is this kind of mix of kind of 1960s like Tezuka manga, like you can see on the cover they have these kind of round Tezuka feet, and it almost has like kind of like a clear line Tintin feel to some of it.
Totally.
And I really like there's a lot of cool architecture. There's these big square buildings that have huge Japanese characters printed on them.
Yeah, the designs are really neat, and it's cool to see it like over this like super long period of time that the architecture changes, and like the way the environment is designed changes, and the way the inhabitants look changes. And yeah, most of the characters are robots, so they are able to tell this like much longer story. The humans in it are almost just like they're smaller pieces that give texture to the robots.
They show a lot of aging of the humans. Like if a human is introduced, then you'll definitely see them aging later in the story.
Yes. And yeah, I don't know, it deals a lot of like interesting ideas, and it's a very, to me it feels like a very hopeful future. It feels kind of like Yashike to me, right? It's like healing media. It's very relaxed and
kind of meandering in that sense too.
Yeah, in that it's not hyper plot driven. There is like a overarching thread, but it is meandering in ways, and it also reminded Yashike, and it also reminded me of something else. I can't remember now.
It's cool. It gives characters sometimes like at each chapter will be these kind of simple ideas, but it'll give like 30 pages to be like, you know, who's two characters that met inside of a big robot, and then them just talking for a little bit before driving off different directions.
Yeah.
I
was gonna say it reminds me of so like it's almost as if this other manga and anime called Yokohama Kaidashi Kiko. I think I'm saying that right. That is one I covered in the Yashike video I did.
That's the one about the robot girl that runs the cafe?
Yes, and that almost feels like it's set in one of the time periods that is covered in this book.
That's cool.
And again, because there are robots there that look like humans and all this. So, yeah, it was really, really good. Except maybe one of the best things that I have read in recent memory.
Yeah, I was impressed by it. There's a cool chapter in it that starts off with like a caveman character drawing on the walls, and then a robot character is watching them, and then it slowly, over the next couple of pages, it goes over essentially the history of humanity.
Yeah.
So then it shows like people farming, and then from people farming they're building a boat, and then you see trains, and then horse-drawn carriages to cars, all the way to like the robot that is viewing all this happening being built in the future.
And the transitions are so good. Like it's just like one panel to the next panel to the next, and each one it somehow manages to not feel rushed while covering 50,000 years in like 30 pages, and that's just in that one chapter. And that robot that you're talking about is one of three called the Chrononauts, which they were designed to like be physical records of human history, and because they will live longer than humans, they can keep our history alive.
Interesting. I'm looking at the way that it is transitioned to that scene going over it. So it's like the robot woman walks out of the cave where the guy's doing cave painting, and then sees people farming, and then looks over at a cow, and then sees someone herding cattle, and then once the cows are passed, there's there's a village where they're doing smelting of a sword, and metallurgy, and then the sword, and then she's looking at the sword cooling, and it's like a silhouette in front of a city that she then walks through,
which is like more developed than the huts previous.
Yeah, exactly. And then through the city she sees boats, and then from boats, and then it kind of jumps and ends less, and it's more just like, here's a train, there's cars, but it is like the character walking through all of this.
Yeah.
And so that's a really smart way to do it.
Totally.
Yeah. So this is a cool book. I was kind of surprised. It's one of those things that I don't expect them to translate because it feels like Japanese indie comics.
Mm-hmm. It does. That's a good description.
And I was surprised it's drawn so simply in some ways that it almost, like, I remember going across certain scenes and being like, I wouldn't have the ability to leave this panel alone as much as this person does.
Yeah, it's a lot of, somehow manages to not, like, it leaves out some detail but doesn't leave out too much. Like, there are somewhat blankish backgrounds. They're sort of very simple shapes a lot of the time, but they feel immersive. Like, you feel like you're in this other world, this other future or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Very impressive. Highly recommend.
Kind of in a contrast to earlier we were talking about Kamui, the thing that I liked about it was the English sound effects in it. The one thing that throws me off a little bit in this is there are English, like, there's a lot of things written on walls in this. There'll be like a giant Japanese character on the side of a building, and they'll have the English translation kind of in the same block layers on it, but they get the line weight off a little bit. Like, it's too skinny when they do it. And I almost wish they just asterisked it and did it at the bottom of the page. But
I think really nitpicking. The difference is like very minimal. I did not even notice it. I liked that they did it in the same look because it kept the aesthetic for me.
Yeah.
But, you know, different eyes. It's all good. But then we also, so I thought that in addition to the comics we've been reading, I could talk about some of the non-comics that I've been reading. I'm like, reading is like most of what I do.
It's
like,
fundamental.
Lots of reading. Yeah. This first book that I was reading recently was The Awful Disclosures of Maria Monk, The Hidden Secrets of Convent Life.
Gee, what a way to sell it.
Yeah, it's very, like, it's framed as very salacious and
Sounds awful.
Like, grab your eye. What's that?
Sounds awful.
Yes, it sounds awful. And indeed it was awful. It's not good. I would not recommend it. It's written as though it is a true recollection of real events, of these like horrible things that happened in this convent in Montreal specifically. And Maria Monk is a real person. She really wrote this. But based on my research, it seems like this is almost certainly not real facts, which is not to say that terrible things have never happened inside of a convent. Maybe they have. I don't know.
We can only hope.
All I know is that these claims were pretty heavily described. She is not a very credible source. She was likely schizophrenic and sort of manipulated by Protestants to create this Catholic hit piece, is what it's almost certainly, what historians believe it to be at this point. When it was first published, it was thought to be credible, and people were aghast. And part of the reason why it was made and why it was thought to be credible at the time is because there was this huge wave of Catholic immigrants coming to North America when this was published, which is like 1800s. And so that's like Irish and Italian people and stuff, and they were seen as like much lesser because they weren't the hardworking Protestants. They were those papal worshipping heathens, basically, is how they were seen. And
Sure.
they do horrible things like murder babies and rape nuns and stuff like that. And so the historical facts don't align with what is said in this book. The different convents that are mentioned don't line up. Just a lot of different details. Like some of the timeline doesn't.
There's a lot of vetting of people becoming monks. Like, it seems like a thing that a lot of mentally ill people would lean towards is going to be a monk. And I wonder if there's a thing where it's just like, yeah, she eats her feet, but someone's got to clean the convent.
No, there is definitely a lot of vetting. I've actually done a bunch of research on the process of people joining convents, and also being sisters who aren't actually in a convent. So like, the nuns that like teach and stuff like this.
Okay.
And there's like a novitiate period where you have to see if you gel with the nuns that you're about to live with for forever.
You have to get beat in.
What?
Like a gang.
No.
Oh.
And this book would have you think that, yes, you do have to. This book actually has way worse initiation rituals, but... and
it was fun to read?
It was not fun to read. So that's the other complaint. Like, if you're going to make a fantastical book, like a book that's not based in reality, make it at least interesting to read. Like, they would just skip over all the really heinous parts and just like sort of, not all of them. Like, they would be fine talking about throwing dead babies in a pit and covering them in lye, but and they go into weird detail about that too. They're like, yeah, so when the nuns do their duty for the priest next door, which is a thing in the book, and then when they sometimes get pregnant, they give birth to the babies, and then they baptize them immediately, and then strangle the babies, and then throw them in the pit in the bottom of the convent. And like, they go into they tell that story repeatedly in this, but then whenever it comes time to like talk about like the sexy and I'm a bad person. I shouldn't want them to
like,
talk
where's
about
the hot nun
stuff.
sex?
That's what I want. I like to read like erotic literature. That's fun, but I'm a bad person. I shouldn't have wanted it in this.
This is a no judgment couch.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not in there. They basically, they say what happens, but like
which BS.
Very briefly. And
I should mention before, you said before when you were talking about them doing their nunly duty with the priest, you'd segue into that from talking about throwing babies and a thing, and I was like, does the priest just hate babies? And he's just like, there's some babies, you guys deal with them. This castle has a horrible baby infestation. Can you guys just deal with all the babies?
Yeah, they don't know how they keep showing up. Those priests are so confused.
So I'm hearing is inaccurate and not even sexy enough to be inaccurate.
Yeah.
And not fun inaccurate, like there's no cyborg nuns, no one rides a werewolf.
No cyborg nuns, yeah. It's true.
Okay, the cover's nice.
Those would have been more fun. Yeah, the cover's fun. It was just... It was stupid. And it was initially published in, like I said, like mid-1800s, I think.
How's the language in it?
But then republished in 1969.
69.
How's the language?
Is it readable?
Yeah, it's readable. It has the very like Victorian like fading away from like offending your eyes kind of thing, which is frustrating, and it's really slow because it's back in the 1800s in Canada. It was more British, and the British speak a lot less clearly than us Americans. That's actually my mom. I'm not just like making that up. My mom actually used to do some like public relations type stuff for a British company, and she would tell me, well, was the company American or British? Doesn't matter. They had offices in England and in the U.S. And when she had to like take the copy from like an ad that originated from England, she would have to like pare down so much of the writing because they just use all these like superfluous words all the time.
Okay.
So it feels
this reads pretty straightforward in a lot of it.
Yeah. So. But the place where I got it is actually much more interesting to me than the book itself. And I have a couple other books from this place, and I'm sure I'll go back. It's I think it's called Avant Pop Books. It's a bookstore here in Las Vegas, in it's New Orleans Plaza. If anybody's in town who wants to go check it out, I highly recommend you go check it out if you're in town.
It had a good Bukowski section.
Yeah, really cool Bukowski section. One of the people that I think owns the place it's a big like Bukowski fan, and had some really interesting like artifacts.
Yeah, he brought out a
artifacts to show
newspaper
us.
which was
His obituary.
yeah,
I think.
Bukowski's obituary from a San Francisco newspaper.
Yeah, and yeah, they're just like really cool people that own it and run it, and
There was a clown art show going on.
there was a clown
Like
art
we were
show
there.
going on. They had like like sexy section of stuff, and then like cool weird sci-fi stuff, and like fantasy stuff, and all these other like all the things basically that we're interested in. They had, and so yeah. Anyways, can't recommend it enough. Also, literally like two storefronts down is a horror themed store with like all your horror needs, whether it's like Jason bath mats or Freddy towels or like whatever, like
Yeah, a lot of that stuff. And two comic stores kind of adjacent to that.
also that, yeah. Have we talked about how much stuff is in Vegas? This sounds so
Vegas
cool and
is
weird.
so deceptive in that they'll have a lot of really interesting stores in strip malls here.
Yes.
So places that you would think would just be the most boring location for anything, where there's going to be nothing but, Bed Bath and Beyond, and they just be like, and here's a place that just like, here's
They just sell handmade cod pieces here. Why not?
Mm. I do have an artisan codpiece.
Other than the one last book, so this one I got from another awesome bookstore here in Las Vegas called The Writer's Block, which it's up on the more north end of town, but is also wonderful. And this was recommended. Yeah, that store's whenever if we're feeling like down or like we don't know what to do, we go to Writer's Block because it's this like beautiful whimsical place. And probably we've talked about it ad nauseum already on here, I think. But this one was recommended to me by a bunch of people, but the person who finally got me to pick it up was our good friend Jenny Blade. She was like, "Yeah, you should read this," and I was like, "Okay, I'll listen to you, Janie." And I'm glad that she recommended it to me and got it in my hands because it is very fun. The setting of it is my favorite part. For sure, it's very like grimdark. It feels sort of Warhammery in a way, but it's also much more fantasy-ish. It's fantasy meets sci-fi. Basically, it's like necromancer Hunger Games kind of, but not really. I don't know.
Is there space travel?
There is space travel, yeah. And it has to do with a galactic empire that's built around necromancy. So, yeah, it's definitely...
One of the things you mentioned to me is people will have parts of bones or something,
Yes.
and they'll throw them, and skeleton creatures will grow out of them and then fight for them.
Yes, that's right.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So they'll wear like bone jewelry, like bones, like studs made out of bones, so they can like take them out whenever they need to fight, throw it, and then through their necromancy, as long as they have a bit of bone, they can like will it to form into a skeleton that can protect them. And
Okay, if
stuff.
somebody had a bone earring and you're a necromancer, could you make it grow in their ear? Is bone just a raw material, or is it like your bone if you have it and you throw it and then no one else can control it? Does that?
They haven't addressed that yet, but that's an
Okay.
interesting premise. I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm only 100 pages in, or 150 out of 500 so far, and there's at least one other book. But yeah, it's super good. My one thing that almost actually turned me off I almost didn't keep reading. I'm glad that I persevered, and I still roll my eyes whenever this author does this, but there are these weirdly contemporary turns of phrase that take me out of the story, and they don't make any sense to me because it's clearly a very different world than our own, but they'll say things like, "I gotta get outie," or that person's old as balls, and it feels very like that kind of stuff feels very juvenile to me.
The Dark Lord was not in his casket because he was getting jiggy with it.
Yeah, like it would genuinely be something as out of place as that. And so, I don't know, maybe some people would find that really endearing and help them connect with this strange world. I prefer things to just be full sail strange and not try to sort of connect it back like in that way. But, and like one of the main things is or one of like the recurring things is that this main character, so she's the eponymous character, Gideon the Ninth. She wears aviator sunglasses, and when the rest of her outfit is so like death metal or black metal, like it's weird to.
Do you think it's a future where sunglass companies wouldn't necessarily exist?
I don't think so. It doesn't seem like they would, but I don't know. That seems like a weirdly modern trapping put on this world. But whatever, different tastes may vary.
Sometimes, like I remember I would get really caught up writing science fiction stuff. Like when I was doing the Prophet comics, I would oftentimes get really frustrated with myself when I had things that, like I remember one point I had a character say okay, and I was like, this is too, like this is ridiculous. They wouldn't say something like this. And then I started to realize that the way language evolves, language wouldn't necessarily be recognizable in thousands of years at all. So essentially I was writing what would be translated stuff. So I wonder if this author is almost like, the aviators make me think not, but I wonder if it's almost like they're not actually speaking English, but this would be their future slang, and this is like the version of it that you're getting to kind of understand what it'd be like.
I don't think, I mean, I've read plenty of sci-fi. I think that when you use, like, slang changes so frequently that it's a very quick way to date something. And so to me, like, I see, like, okay isn't out of place to me, because that is a saying that is so pervasive, and technically it's slang, but like, no, I mean,
where it stood the test
of time. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Something might almost seem more timeless if you use slang from a different era,
or if you made up slang. That's what I like. I like it when Sarai, yeah, exactly. Like I grok that from like Heinlein and stuff. Or even I really liked in like Firefly, they would like use like Chinese-ish slang, or sometimes just straight up Chinese, mixed in, because in that future there's the idea that like Chinese and like American English, whatever, culture is sort of like were the dominant cultures.
That was a good way to do it.
Yeah. And so I think there are really interesting, cool, fun ways to do it that not only don't take you out of the story, but actually like build the story, like build your immersion. This does not do that. This unfortunately takes you out of the story in that way. But I mean, it's compared to the setting, it has become a minor complaint. At first I was like, no, I don't like this. But God, I kept reading. It's really cool setting, and it has some cool ideas, and I'm excited to see where all it goes. But yeah, that's the end of our stacks for now. Thanks for watching. If you got something out of this video, please click that like button and subscribe. And until next time.
Cool. Thanks for watching.
Bye.